Hey, I'm Chris Petkas. I'm a general partner at Contrarian Thinking Capital. Other side of our business is a media side run by my wife, Codie Sanchez. We've got about 9 million followers across channels, 120 million monthly views. We talk about the future of entrepreneurship, mostly around boring businesses, and what we see in this great tech-native exchange of businesses having to do with the boring business sector. So these two are solving incredible problems or friction points that have long existed in long-held industries. And I'm excited to be able to introduce both of them. Alexander Seutin to my far left, Alex and Alex, by the way, is founder and CEO of Drillbit, where he focuses on the intersection of technology and home services. His career has been driven by a goal to create affordable and sustainable housing solutions, influenced by his personal experience with housing insecurity and a desire to make an impact on the future of autonomous infrastructure development. Alex Chakowski is the co-founder and CEO of Sense, a company focused on building software for the garment care services industry. He previously founded Ulingo, a payments platform for higher ed, which was acquired in 2019. Alexander's focus is on finding opportunities by building in unsexy industries. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about the AI sphere and the impact, but first I want to give these guys the opportunity to kind of introduce yourselves a little bit more if I missed anything. And then really, what does Sense and what does Drillbit, what is the problems that you guys are really trying to solve?
Yeah, I can kick it off. So like you mentioned, I grew up in San Francisco with a single mom, so it's a city where cost of living is very high. So for me, I've always thought a ton about cost of living. That's like the single largest expense for most people. And growing up in that environment, I always really cared about trying to solve that. But my skill set that I developed professionally was always in computer science. So that's what I studied when I went to Stanford. I got a degree in AI. And then I bounced around like a lot of different big tech companies doing different applied AI solutions. So that was like the flight systems at SpaceX, the self-driving at Rivian, even self-driving excavators at a construction tech startup in San Francisco. So after a while of doing that, they're very like cool problems to be solving, but I didn't feel like they were tangibly doing all that much, maybe with the exception of the excavators. So I moved out to Austin during the pandemic, did some housing renovations on my own, and got more familiar with these sort of unsexy businesses and how they operate. And it was clear that there was just so much low-hanging fruit. So I eventually decided to start Drillbit, where we're essentially just trying to allow people who provide a valuable service like painting or plumbing or electrical work, we're giving them more of their day back to be able to focus on actually doing that work instead of all the like overhead with managing leads or following up with people. Frankly, just like the very low leverage stuff that's just like a risk to the business but doesn't actually help provide a better service. So yeah, we met up with this group, I'd say last summer when we started working with Resi Brands, so large franchisor, and basically we're now at this point automating all of their contact center solution. There's now no human beings working there, and we just have these AI employees that are essentially running an entire department in about $100 million business. So it's been a great proof of concept, and we're trying to push the boundary there and see how much we can run with these AI employees.
Yeah, from Sense.
From Sense, yes. I have a much different background. Have no real care or love for laundry whatsoever. I probably feel very similarly to all of you guys. And I didn't get a degree in anything fancy. I dropped out of college to run my first business. So I don't have like that hero's journey of finding the problem in the same way that it would probably be a nicer sell if I did. But my story is I grew up in Bay Area, went to school down in Orange County at Chapman University, and during that time saw a bunch of pin boards on campus, thought that was super dumb and they should be online. That just makes a little bit more sense today. And so ended up building kind of a digital marketplace for college students. Realized getting college students to do anything that isn't social media or something stupid is very challenging, very costly, not a skill set I have to know how to market to people in a kind of direct-to-consumer way. But we knew there was an interesting need and demand for students to have a safe way to transact, buy, sell, et cetera. Ended up pivoting the business, creating white-labeled infrastructure for universities. So you go to marketplace.vanderbilt.edu, you log in with your student ID, and we facilitated all what we call student life commerce, meal plans, membership dues, everything that wasn't tuition. And we ran that for about 5 years after I left school. Ended up selling it in 2019, and you have an earnout. You work at a company for the first time. You get the corporate thing. I didn't play golf, so I didn't know what do you do What else do you do when you have your earn out and you got to work and become an employee again? And so that's when I thought about it would be kind of fun to open a bar. Like that was a fun way to lose some money, and like, you know, my friends would be fun, and like we could just have a good time. So I got deeper into the hospitality space, and the more people I spoke to, the more told me how much I would actually hate my life and it wouldn't be fun. One day I hopefully will do it. But I met somebody at an event who said that his neighbor at his lake house outside Boston owned 4 laundromats and was the former president of the New England Coin Laundry Association and made a killing owning these laundromats. And I shouldn't open a bar and hate my life. I should look at being, you know, buy a laundromat or two. And I thought that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Who the hell? I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have gone to a laundromat recently. I don't know what you're picturing in terms of the average laundromat owner. I promise you I was probably picturing, maybe different with Codie's content and seeing all the sophisticated investors, call it 5-6 years ago. I didn't have Codie's content, so I couldn't have seen, I think, the rising sophistication level of SMBs in this space. So naturally, you join the Golden State chapter of the Coin Laundry Association. You go to the meetups, you start to meet all these operators, and you realize, holy crap, this is an amazing business, it's an amazing industry, and the operators that I met 6 years ago looked like everybody here. You don't get in the laundry because you love garment care and fashion. You get it because you have money. And this is a byproduct of your own entrepreneurial spirit. And so when I looked at buying a couple stores, that was the realization of like, you know, salons, barbershops, gyms, home service professionals, so many other verticals have really sophisticated billion-dollar companies all building hyper-verticalized solutions. In garment care, you have even more niche, weird elements I won't go into right now that make it kind of a difficult business to run and scale. And so realized instead of buying stores myself, we should build for them. And that was in 2021. And now we've raised close to $100 million and we power 1 in 10 US laundromats and have a product that kind of powers every single element of it. And, you know, still early innings, but it's been a fun ride so far.
That's awesome. And I think both of you, you know, you have high friction point problems that you're solving, which leads to very high LTV, right? And you guys are both in a really interesting way doing the picks and shovels thing. So what I love about both of your success stories, right, is the fact that you have to go into an industry that hasn't been disrupted in a very, very long time, and you have to start with like the infrastructure stage, right? So I would love to hear each of your take on where do you start, right? Do you go macro to micro? Like, do you go highest friction point? Do you start with workflow? Do you start with customer interface? Like, where did you start, and you know, how was that decision made?
I'll go because I'm holding. But I'd say because in our industry, we have no vertical player, meaning we're the only venture-backed company in the space. So there's a good thing about that because there's generally a vacuum that you can fill when there's a lot of demand. However, there is no comp, there is no company we can build a layer on and integrate with. There's not like a cheap and light way to do it. Our plan was to power 100% of the way laundry is done in America through these SMBs. And so we followed the very similar principle of what you'd see in, you know, the Toasts of the world, the Gloss Geniuses, the kind of best-in-class vertical software businesses, which are starting from the POS. But all of it, you know, it's an iceberg. Everything was very deliberate. What you see and why we built the POS, we never had ambition to just be a POS company, right? But you do the POS because it gives you the touch point of the employee, the customer, the order, and now you have something physical, hardware that's inside of the location. And that gives us the opportunity to then do all the other things that we want to do. So we didn't have, like, our thesis has always been, and it's been a very up and down roller coaster to get there, but the thesis has always been we want to power everything. That's our play, right? That we have no competition, we can own. That's the beauty of vertical software. Right. Vertical software you should have in like way out of market penetration. You can, you know, Toast will get to 10 or 15% market share until they have to go more broadly. Absolutely. In a hyper verticalized space, you can get 70 to 80% market share. You can get much higher attachment rates to all the new products you deploy, so long as you have a good kind of core infrastructure, and you should have very, very little churn. And so, you know, for us, it was how do we wedge ourselves in there and then be able to penetrate the market quickly while also deploying new products consistently that gets us deeper into the kind of the wallet share of the operator. But it was for us, it's always the wedge product, but we know and we knew how much pain was going to be ahead of us in terms of what we needed to build in order to be the kind of company that we had to be from a venture standpoint.
That's super helpful to understand, especially when you talk about attachment almost as being a function of LTV and churn. I would actually be interested to kind of play with that formula, what that looks like. Super interesting. From Drillbit.
Yeah. So in our case, despite my background in AI, when I first decided to go after this vertical, I wanted to just build more traditional tooling, like a more traditional SaaS platform, because my assumption was that we didn't need AI yet. I thought that just with better tools, these businesses could be more organized. There's just so much low-hanging fruit when it comes to streamlining their process. And when you come from an engineering background, it's painful to see a process that's not totally optimized. So I started off building that, and then I was just sort of willfully ignorant that I'm like, no, if the system's good enough, people will come. But then over time, it became clear that CAC is very high, and the reason is that it's incredibly difficult to get people from this industry to onboard onto a software system. Mm-hmm. And so the key insight became any SaaS platform fundamentally is an amplifying kind of function where you can put a little bit of effort in and get a lot of value out. But if people aren't willing to put any effort in, it doesn't matter how good the SaaS platform is, you're getting no value out. So what I did is I just kept having to kind of grease the groove and make it easier and easier and easier, basically require our users to have less input until I got to the point where it was clear the only way to penetrate the market was to fully automate this and basically not only build the system of record and the kind of SaaS version of this platform, but also add something that was equivalent to an employee on top of it. And if you could do that, you could bundle the two things together and actually offer a service. So in our case, we started off with the call center solution because there was a very acute pain point with Resi brands, and it was a $1 million a year pain point, which needed solving very quickly because Resi has a lot of ambition as to the number of locations they want to scale to next year. So that's where we kind of dug in and basically really rendered out our solution. And at this point, it's amazing because there's zero human interaction whatsoever in the job management, which is just this awesome proof of concept. And I hope we can continue to chain those solutions together to then get more of the end-to-end job management.
No, it's super helpful to understand. And an interesting kind of thing that we talked about at dinner last night, we were part owners of Resi Brands as well at Contrarian Thinking as on our Hold It Co side of the house. And Alex disrupted an entire call center overnight, quite literally, to the point to where everybody else working there said, okay, we see this. The implementation of this is not going to drive a wedge between us. It's going to completely take away our business. And they decided to quit over the next few days.
Yeah, actually to touch on that. So I think a lot of people will see, and this was actually, I think the title of the event is it's, about amplification instead of replacement. And so when you talk about amplification versus replacement, you have to think about who as a society, who do we feel a responsibility towards? Mm-hmm. And the way I think of it is I kind of just quantify how many people experience a given problem. So housing affordability is something that touches everybody, whereas call center reps is a much more niche problem. Yeah. So sort of if I can help the whole, if I can basically contribute towards a better system that reduces the operational expenditure involved in owning and maintaining a home, and that comes at the expense of some call center reps, it is unfortunate, but it's in pursuit of a greater good. And for me, that's worthwhile. Mm-hmm. And basically what's been great about starting to work with more and more businesses is I get a lot of insight into their businesses. I have access to data that they don't really even quite know about themselves. And being able to quantify the customer acquisition costs for any given home service has honestly been quite shocking. It's just such a large percentage of the overall job's cost. And that's just cost that's directly passed on to homeowners. And it's not necessarily helping the business do a better service, it's just waste.
Yeah.
So by cutting this out, you can really genuinely offer the service at 2/3 of the price to half the price, but still have the business make the same margin. I think we can all agree that having services done more reliably and having our homes better maintained is kind of good for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I think you hit on a really interesting point there, especially as kind of we think about it in a larger way. And perfect segue is how we think about this in terms of the implementation, right, and the acquisition of new technologies in these high friction point, long, undisrupted areas. So I would love to hear, for each of you, what has been the balance between apprehensiveness and acceptance, especially amongst your customers? And then, if you have some anecdotes from where it was a few years ago to where it is now, right? Because we were joking upstairs, a lot of our, blue collar business owners are AI is Skynet. I don't want the Terminator coming knocking on my door, right? When you're like, no, I'm literally going to save you a quarter of your cost in overhead.
Yeah.
So-
I think Alex would be a good place to start because you started your business a lot earlier than I did, so we can kind of go through the timeline.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I'd say for us, it's a little bit different in terms of how we think about building product. Laundromat owners are serving generally, it's a broad spectrum. You get super high net worth people sending out their laundry, doing pick up delivery. We're also serving the lowest of income people. They're an essential business within the store. So our focus is actually how do we make a laundromat a better place to work, and how do we make it a more profitable business for the operators, so better operators get into the industry who are investing more in their stores, which then create better experiences for the customers within them. So it's our approach to deliver better end user experiences and make the world a better place or whatever, is by helping business owners make more money. Like that is everything that we do. How do you own more stores with lower G&A, higher margin, and infinitely more scalable? Yeah. I'd say from the very beginning, we thought, you want to build need to have products, and then you want all the nice to have products feel like needs, right? That's always the path. So we start with the point of sale because we know that you're taking things over the counter, and our biggest competitor was pen and paper. So okay, if we can take what you're doing on pen and paper, we're not going to transform, we're not going to revolutionize, we're not going to be a change agent, we're just going to digitize and then give you optionality. You could do it exactly the same. You can augment, you can have pen and paper over here and then have a digital infrastructure, and you're only using that so you don't have to go to the store yourself, and you don't have to stare at security cameras, and you have to do text messages. Mm-hmm. So you start with for us, and we're, versus franchise and enterprise, working with SMBs where they sold their house and their laundromat is their whole, everything they have. It's their college fund. The main investment is their net worth. It's the nest egg. It's the big risk that they took. We never, and I believe this in all vertical SaaS, is you should never say you're going to be transformative to the SMB, because without you, they're fine. If none of us exist, you're going to get your house built and you're going to go to get your laundry done. Like they can't not exist without us. Yeah. They'll be fine, but we can potentially help them grow their business and help them do it differently. And so the approach mattered a lot. In the early stage for us, new tech company that had no tech in the industry before, is met with not skepticism over technology, because everybody in our industry, even if they don't know how to open a laptop, are sophisticated in their own right. They also own storage units and restaurants, or they did something where they look at this as a cash flow asset, not a hobby or a passion project, right? So they have a general sophistication. So trust was the main thing. It wasn't even quality of product or our background. If anything, the more money we raised, which would show stability, gave them more thought that why am I going to invest in buying your products when you've raised so much money? You're going to burn it all or run out, or you're going to sell the company, and who am I going to be who am I going to be left with? Because very relationship heavy industry. So it was getting very deep with our customers and spending a lot of time with them in person on Zoom with their attendants to know their business, to feel like we're peers. We know the industry just as well, if not more than they do, even though we don't own our own stores. Once you have that trust, then your product roadmap almost is an inbound, idea flow from your customers. Yeah. And so as we've built all of the products, it's felt like a very, the joke we make, if you ever watch Silicon Valley and that guy goes and drops acid in the desert to think of the next thing. It's we don't have to do that, right? It's very straightforward in terms of what we need to build. It's we don't have to be, we're not inherently geniuses.
I kind of wish you would though, maybe.
Oh no, I didn't.
And then record it.
The next offsite, you'll think about it. But you don't have to be a genius to build good products. Very generally linear. There's a lot of companies that have done it really well. It's all about the execution. And then when you have the customer, when you're powering 100% of your business, kind of talking about on the AI front, it's how it's introduced. And so when we launched our call center, which was something that, I always wanted to do since the very beginning of the business, I just thought it was going to be in the Caribbean with people. Until we realized, wait, that's actually the AI stuff's pretty good. And so when we launched ours, I made probably an obsessive point to say that we'll never tell anybody it's an AI call center. We'll say it is a contact center powered by AI and humans. So we actually have, maybe it's one or two, I don't remember how many people we have, physical people in a call center ready to take over any call that goes, the thousands of calls we have every week. They're ready to take over an escalation. Mm-hmm. So the operator doesn't feel like we are making them dependent on AI. Now it's different in our industry than home services and companies like ServiceTitan and Drillbit and things like that, where the calls are not usually revenue driven, right? It's support. So we're giving them more time and optimization. So it's much more of a support engine. And so they just don't want the fucking phone call. They just don't want to deal with it. They're playing golf. They're with their kids. They're looking at another business to buy. They don't want to call that dryer 14 doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, they want somebody to handle that. They want to know what happened. They want to make sure that their English as a second language employee in the store doesn't have to deal with the phone call while they're also hopefully, you know, processing 50 pounds of laundry an hour and all of that.
Yeah.
So it fit a different need. And funny enough, while I thought that having the human element was going to be so important, I think it's like 88 or 92% of our phone calls are all handled by AI, and then, you know, go within the platform.
Right.
But operators are stunned by the quality of the AI. So they get much more excited about its abilities, but we just didn't want them to think that we're trying to push them to automated systems, even though they want the automated systems.
Right.
So we know that they would go more towards the AI, but again, we're not trying to transform, we're not trying to change, we're trying to give you optionality and over time guide you to make the best decision for your business, which is to automate more and, you know, do things like Drillbit has done. So that's kind of been our product development thesis up until these kind of new and innovative concepts. And we've been punched in the face enough. You know, we launched the gig economy delivery, right? Before us, there had never been an Uber driver or a DoorDash driver that picked up somebody's laundry, brought it to a laundromat, brought it from a laundromat back to their house. It never happened before. And when we did that, it was like, I can't even explain the negative sentiment that we had because we were doing something that had never been done.
You made fire.
We made fire and a hurricane, tsunami, earthquake at once. It was remarkable. But over time, what I would have done differently there is I would have done that with the same infrastructure of having fleet management with your own drivers and a driver app. We started on gig economy because it makes so much more sense. It's asset light. Anybody can get into delivery. And then we didn't launch like our own drivers, you know, if you have your own drivers or own fleet management tools, till like 6 months or a year later in infrastructure. If we had done that inverse, I don't think we would have had the same push because we wouldn't be telling people to do something different.
You wouldn't have the same level of awe.
Correct. We wouldn't be telling somebody to do something different. We would say, do what you're doing. Here's an opportunity to augment whenever you want.
Yes, shock and awe campaign.
Exactly. There's a little bit of that, which helps. We've got a lot of customers to it. But I think with SMBs, you want to meet them where they are and hold their hand through innovation because they're open to it. They're excited. They're sophisticated. They want it. But you know, it's a delicate process is what we found.
That's super helpful. And something that you said is probably the most poignant statement that I've heard in thinking about this problem set, like not kidding, for the last year, is our competitor is pen and paper. Like that blew my damn mind just now. Like,
well, and coin.
That was my acid in a desert experience equivalent just right now. So thank you for that. Seriously.
Yeah. So I guess perception of AI with our customers, it's sort of shifted over time where. Yeah.
Like I guess push on the perception of AI, but like specifically, where would you start? Like what's the address? Like what's the first address?
Yeah. So I guess like it was sort of a process to uncover this as we were building. I mentioned that originally we were doing more SaaS platform kind of type stuff, and then we eventually added more and more AI in. It was really clear where there was like a very strong positive emotional reaction as soon as we added the voice, because it's very difficult. I mean, I have a lot of respect for like the people who run these businesses, and a lot of them actually come from pretty sophisticated backgrounds, and like they really do want to operate it. So I guess on your point, the first thing is like when you're defining your ideal customer profile, it is important to target the people who are interested in growth, because the value prop is so different for them as opposed to like a more mom and pop shop that's like very content with the stage they're at, and they like their customers and they don't want any help. So we had to like learn that over time, but eventually once we started talking to the people who are interested in growth, and then we picked an industry with home services where they have like a large volume of total number of jobs they need to do just to make ends meet, because the size of any given job is just a smaller ticket. So once we figured that out, then we eventually over last summer added in the voice component, and it was very clear that the reception to our system was super different, because all of a sudden, like all this abstract stuff I was talking about with how we're gonna like enhance their workflows and one employee was gonna be equivalent to 5 or 10 or whatever, all of a sudden that clicked because they heard it and it sounded like a human, and I was able to go through like onboarding a new employee all in like 30 seconds, and then they could just talk to it then and there. And they've had so much experience like trying to find people and onboard them that like the pain was just very clear to them.
Yeah.
So voice was honestly a huge element. And then because we knew we wanted people who were interested in growth, we had to find that large partner that like they really had that ambition. And so then the next thing was we had to think about like our big vision to do the end-to-end job management. The difficult part about that is not the individual modules, it's actually like solving for the input to each module. Basically like, say you built like a more horizontal solution just to do AI-based quoting, but no lead management whatsoever.
Yeah.
You would need to like find all the general context to input to the AI to get it to give a somewhat accurate quote.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to have enough buy-in where you have aggregated data across like services provided across the entire country to also kind of know the correct answer of what the quote should be.
Yeah, so aggregating the inputs is gigantic.
Yeah, it's a huge thing, reaching scale quickly. But like what we did is like, we're like, okay, because we need that input, the only way to get that is to have started at the beginning of the job's life, which is the lead. And if we can capture that in our system and store it in our system, and like we're the receptionist who's having those conversations, we're storing those summaries in our system, that means by the time we get to the quoting module, we have tons of context that we can provide to it. And so basically like chaining these modules together is what makes the whole worth more than the sum of its parts. And we're already seeing that with our customers, where like we're now kind of in the extra credit territory where like we've done the thing they brought us on to do. And now we're chaining together these like deeper modules, which are just having like enormous wins with very little engineering effort from our end.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then while you still have the mic, and I think this is a perfect segue as well into, talk about your initial customer journey, right? Talk about how you went from a, targeted, disaggregated model now to like going all in on a major customer.
Yeah. So, I mean, I went through Y Combinator last summer, and so they're amazing. They give you such great advice. Like they've just seen thousands and thousands of businesses like at various stages. So their mental model of what works and doesn't is just like so on point. And one of the things they really emphasized was just making sure that you're loved by a small set of people before just trying to be somewhat liked by a large set. It's always tempting when you're starting a business to be like, oh, I want, higher total number of employees or higher total number of revenue, because they're sort of vanity metrics that you can like share with your peers at parties. But in practice, like what really matters is that the business is actually going to go somewhere, and you get there by like paying a lot of attention, paying like a disproportionate amount of attention to clients, and then also picking clients that are very aligned with your vision. And so that was like the best thing about finding Resi, is that like they are very bought into the long-term shifts that we'll see in the industry. And you guys too, as their co-owner, there's just so much natural alignment for like where we all think this is going to go. So it's allowing me the room as someone with a technology background to like solve the problems really well, rather than just sort of muddying the waters with doing a ton of customer service for people who might not see the vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you're sitting now in a layer where you get to iterate on the data that's not being collected at large on the customer for your customer, right? But you're also seeing how you've completely upended or changed a workflow that's existed for a long time in a newer franchise that's taking like a 21st century approach to it.
Yeah, and I love Alex's point about like not needing to go do acid. Like it's so.
This is Austin, so this crowd is.
Yeah, true. Yeah, we are in Austin, so I don't know. Maybe I could benefit from it, but but it is awesome to be like, we have to be the technologists to figure out how to do something, but the what we're doing is very clear.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And then Alex from Sense, I'd love to talk about maybe the opposite end of that spectrum, right? And once you found your wedge, what was it like going from 10 customers to your first 1,000 and now 10% of all garment care industry?
U.S. laundromats, but no, we're getting there.
I'm gonna use mine.
I like it.
But anyways, like, please talk to us about that.
I mean, I can, what I always say is I could give you a picture from 10 customers to 1,000 that seems so thoughtful and perfectly executed along the way. Could also give you one that is the most mistake-ridden journey at the same time. So, for the way that we've always built the business, it's very gut and feel. We've become much more data oriented, in the last couple of years, but it's been very much get our hands dirty. We always said, like, a fireable offense for an employee if in their first 30 days they don't work inside of a laundromat for a day. Like, you have to understand what it means to be an operator, a customer, and an employee in that business. It's been the anchor of what we call kind of our guiding principles. But our path to 10 to 1,000 is much more of like an internal ability to execute, roll our sleeves up, and understand the business than a go-to-market question.
Yeah.
There's been, when you're in an industry as large as we're in with no competition, it's kind of like you should get to 1,000 customers, right? So our journey was first much more inward looking at how do we build the right kind of culture and environment internally that is going to breed scale. And I'd say the more money we've had in the business, the more challenging it's become. That's why, today we've got $500,000 per every one headcount in kind of our on a revenue per employee basis, and we're trying to get to. But like we have two, like our 1-to-1s we call them, right? Our 1-to-1 say and do ratio. You say one thing, you do it. Don't say two things and do one, and don't do two and say one. And the other is 1 million in revenue to every one every one headcount, right? That is the goal. In terms of how we operate. And so I'd say from a journey perspective, I have been inside of more laundromats than anybody should on the face of the earth. I literally wear socks that say we love laundromat owners. You got to be a psychotic, obsessed person to be able to efficiently scale and it feel very genuine and you want to do it. So I think the time spent with customers to better understand the why behind, and that's kind of been our progression, is we know what we know how to build it, we know what to build, but anchoring kind of our internal why, which and also the why of the customers. What are they trying to get out of our product? Why did they get into the industry? And I think that we've struggled with kind of finding our ICP because you have a one-store operator who's the most sophisticated, ambitious, ready to grow that you've ever seen, and I've got the largest customer in the industry who is our first customer, who has been at the same amount of stores for 30 years. They're still the largest, and they have probably the worst margins. But they're there, and now they're trying to get there because they're realizing the power of technology, but they move slower. And when you've been in business for 30 years and you have your own, Frankenstein infrastructure, that's the only problem with having pen and paper as our biggest competitor. It's not a comp. Yeah. Right? You can't comp software to pen and paper. If they had any other horizontal software solution, the switch is easy.
It's the horse in the Model T.
Exactly. So so that's, I think that maybe not said in the best way, but I think just going through the pain and suffering of just talking to customers and getting yelled at and getting punched and going through the entire process is what has enabled us to scale. And I think that the lessons learned along that way. But we've changed comp plans and territories 3 different times and pricing 5 different times, and you make different hires at an executive level. Like, everything is that kind of constant evolution that you can read about in any great vertical SaaS go-to-market playbook. Yeah. So I think that the message that more of what I want to share outside of what you might just generally read from or talk to from a great sales leader on how you scale is the importance that we had of building true, genuine relationships with mass amount of customers and a lot of in-person time with them to better understand all of the nuances of the industry. For me personally, it was to make sure that I can do outside of an engineer, I can do anybody's job in the company. Hopefully, maybe not as well, but I can cover it. Anybody wants to take PTO, I can cover their job. Wow. In general. I can onboard customers, sell customers. The first hardware devices we have in Petaluma, California are a little wonky because I drilled them in. But I think, and I would say now, most of our employees, I would argue, could also do my job and other people's jobs within the company. And that's what's enabled us to stay so lean on a headcount basis. Yeah. And that's what's required to get to, now we're at 3,500 locations, 2 acquisitions, a lot of fundraising, and still a huge product. Yeah. I mean, I'd say it's bigger than Toast, bigger than a lot of companies, and that's not a flex. It's more like we are insane people, and it's what's required. But I think that's been, like, our team, our ability to execute, and the depth we get in the industry and the relationships we've built with customers has been, more than anything else, the sole reason we've been able to scale.
That's amazing. So obsession, masterclass in culture, and understanding what metrics really drive the rest of the business as well as your customers. Yeah,
and then just a willingness to go to kind of endure the things that are that most people won't. And I think that high tolerance for pain is the best way to scale.
Speaking of pain, Alex from Drillbit, you're in the pain cave right now, right? You're a little earlier stage. Talk to us a little bit about, like, what is growth like in such archaic industries? Like, how do you target that? What's been successful, and like what surprised you?
Yeah, I guess for context for the audience, I started Drillbit about 1.5 years ago. And I'd say the first like 8-9 months was like, I come from a technical background, so I like built most of the early versions of the product and put them in front of people. And yeah, it was like a very different kind of pain from the pain now, where it was just like grind, like very, IC heavy. And then figuring out how to like start to like get our first customers and first revenue was like a very different style of pain. It's interesting to shift from like a world that's like totally within your control when it comes to building a product to like then having to convince other people to engage with it and then give you like large amounts of money for it. So there's been definitely like a lot of learnings. I can kind of go into different ones, like as far as like how we think about pricing, how we think about like selling the future versus selling the past. There's a lot of like small lessons.
Yeah, I would say what might be helpful for the audience is like what's surprising you most about this type of archaic industry? It's like what just like slapped you in the face? For instance, YC is such a forward-thinking accelerator, right? What maybe misnomers or what's interesting that you've realized around these archaic, undisrupted, boring businesses that's just like kind of like giving you a slap in the face.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that earlier insight I mentioned about like how there's a large unwillingness to interact or like babysit a solution, and so it was interesting like looking at like different sort of competitors in the space, Service Titan, House Call Pro, Jobber, all these more like kind of classical SaaS CRMs. But then like talking to clients and realizing how much they hated that interaction was very insightful. And then, yeah, I guess I'd say like I think people just like, they want to grow their businesses, but they don't quite know how. And they have this preconceived idea of software as a thing being bad.
Right.
And they also kind of feel like SaaS contracts like are fundamentally stealing from them because they've never really seen a good example of getting value from anything they paid for. So it's like, man, this guy's going to schmooze me. I'm going to sign this contract.
Like Alex was saying, there's no comp to pen and paper.
Yeah. So they're just like, I don't know why I'm spending money on this. But yeah, so that was interesting to overcome. But then once we shifted to the service model, we even actually for a while, we charged as a percentage of gross revenue to really align ourselves as partners. And we like stood by it where we said, there's no downside risk to you. If we don't provide value to you, we don't get paid.
Wow.
But then on the flip side, you have to also accept that
you got to deliver big time.
But there's upside in it for us. So that, bled into my earlier point about like why we take a disproportionate amount of time on each client. So yeah, it's just been interesting to uncover that. But I guess I would say like the theme here is that it does feel like we have a new opportunity to redefine people's perception of software because AI feels like such a fundamentally new thing that I've been pleasantly surprised by how, there's some preconceived notions about like it being maybe evil, but other than that, like the value of an AI system is like we have this fresh slate to go out and impress them, and I definitely enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And I think maybe to cap this off before we go to Q&A, a question I'd like to pose to both of you, something that we love about both of your companies is the fact that, when you look down the line, like what does disruption look like for you guys? It's very hard to think about because you are putting yourselves at an infrastructure layer for services that are being provided. And even if you have you're able to automate those services being provided, which I don't think because it's way more art than science for each of you, it's very hard to see what's disruptive right down the line. So how are you both thinking about what artificial intelligence will do for the boring business sector in the coming future and for your businesses?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing is like, this industry is not going anywhere. It's enormous. We spend like $700 billion a year in the US just on like super simple home maintenance tasks. So there's going to be a lot of people doing these services, and you're right. Like, I guess actually one more point before I kind of conclude here is when you think about like tech startups, there's a lot of companies that are going after the shortage of housing, which is a really, really important problem. Obviously, there's a lot of unhoused people. But what's often overlooked is that we have a large supply of existing homes. We have 150 million or so in the US, and those are all actively depreciating. Every day that goes by, they get a little bit older, a little bit crappier. And what's even worse is that the standards of construction are like going down. We're not building to as high of standards. If you've bought a 2x4 from Home Depot, you know this. Like they're all warped and crappy, and they'll have the finger grooves. Like they're just like made up of smaller pieces. They're terrible. Right. So the need to streamline the maintenance process is only getting larger. And I think in order to get all this work done, there's no robot that is going to be able to like solve these one-off problems, because every home is built slightly differently. The way we get this work done is we empower the people who are the humans who have like these trade skills who can do the work. And then the point of the software and the AI is to sort of grease the groove for them to make it easier for them to do the value adding service. Like if you're a painter, you should spend as much of your day painting as possible, not being on the phone. Right. And we've done this with like Uber drivers can just get in a car and drive all day. But for some reason, other industries haven't benefited from that. So that's where I think all of this is really going, is like people with a skill are going to spend a larger portion of their day doing that skill, and that benefits everybody.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Alex from Sense, take us home.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that worries me the most in our industry would probably be like nudist colonies, because then that's, where's the GMV? Where's that go? But outside of that, not our best market. It's not our best market. Outside of that, we think of like disruption and risk in two ways, right? I would make the argument that maybe home services and laundry, one of the things that aren't going away outside of the colonies, and I'd say that's generally going to be because and we've seen this from an investment standpoint, pandemic proof, recession proof. You drop bombs somewhere, a laundromat's popping up. I mean, I say this in the nicest way, they're like the cockroaches of Main Street. They just don't die. They are always going to be there. And so we don't think of disruption in terms of the SMB. They serve a very kind of varying consumer from the lowest of income to the highest of income. I think of it in two ways in terms of disruption. Is one, the quality and sophistication of the operator in the space. I think that is the disruption that we're seeing. It used to not be possible, and it's just starting now, but it used to not be possible that you would ever buy a laundromat, further than 45 minutes from your house. Because invariably you have to be there. The idea of but if you open a franchise and, in the home services space, if you own or in cleaning or restaurants or anything, you have nationwide chains and you have a franchise, you're in 12 states. And like, that's a very normal operation. Yeah. That doesn't exist here in garment care. In laundromats in particular, I think it's about 65% of stores are owned by multi-store owners, but the average operator only owns 2. Because every new store you buy, you blow up your G&A, you're buying yourself a job, it's not as profitable, so it doesn't make sense. And so we're going to see more operators be able to consolidate the industry, and good operators. I think that's what we want.
We're not looking at like PE gigantic roll-ups where you're going to have people own 6, 8, 10, 12 locations rather than a PE roll-up to have 100.
Because you still need an operator, right?
Absolutely.
Will one day PE want to buy 200 of them? Sure. Every day I get a LinkedIn message from somebody with some money who says, I want to own 1,000 stores. I'm like, great. Go do it. We're here for you. But that's been a historically difficult thing. And I think with the access of technology, with AI and how you can scale operations while maintaining the thing you care about most, which are your margins, I think that's where the disruption is going to come in. And I think on the flip side, our industry has been powered by legacy software with not massive market penetration either. Right. And so you have a risk profile of the execution abilities of your vendors, right? Because there's not a lot of investment in this space. If we don't execute, if our 2 or 3 competitors, or however many there are, don't execute, that's the big risk of disruption for the growth of the industry as well, for those scaling operators. We have operators that have raised, $100 million to go buy a bunch of laundromats, and we're part of their deck. If we don't get to execute the way we want, that's going to create a ripple effect and disruption there as well. So that's why we focus so much on just executing on the core of what we need to do and have a lot of commitment there. But I think, with sophisticated operators, you're going to also start to see a brand of laundry. A lot of people will say, I don't go to a laundromat, but I hate doing my laundry. I'd like to send it out. It's crazy that you can get your lawn mowed, you can, Uber Eats, you can do all the kind of, get your house cleaned by the click of a button. But the idea of sending out your laundry is something that has never been branded. There has been no nationwide effort. There's a couple direct-to-consumer companies that are gaining in some popularity, but giving the small business owner the ability to go up market and expand their serviceable addressable market and get into delivery and not just have to focus on their 1 mile radius of 90% of their customers. That's where I think you're going to see more nationwide chains, more efforts of operators to invest in their location. Because historically, you can slap a red coin laundry logo up and you're going to have 30% margins and you're going to have 95% customer retention and you're going to be fine. And so that baseline is what's gotten less sophisticated or less interested in investing in growth operators to realize it's a good cash flow machine. But I think with better operators coming in, with greater access to technology, so long as folks like us execute, there's going to be not just scale of locations, but scale of brand. And I think that's going to be a huge anchor for Main Street.
Yeah, that's significant. And I think what you both do is realizing the tooling that you provide for SMBs, they expand into markets they never thought possible. And just like you said, taking business now outside that 1 mile, 2 mile radius.
And I'd also say the other element, just in what is happening, I think everywhere, not just laundry, but you have the big private equity firms, private equity backed companies in laundry. It's like Cintas, you might see them driving all their trucks. Cintas and Aramark, these big commercial laundry companies, and some of our operators are all winning their business. One operator got, I think a year or two ago, won the Rolls-Royce contract in Indianapolis, and that was a Cintas contract, and then it was won by a random business in Indianapolis.
Because people are going local now.
People are going local, and better operators, they have the assets, they have the footprint, they have the logistics, they can do the service at a better price and a better quality, and sometimes at a higher price but better quality, and that's what people want. They want reliable quality, and it's not just a race to the bottom anymore. So the commercial element of having SMBs win against the big roll-ups that are getting lazy and kind of falling asleep at the wheel, that's another element I think a lot of verticals are going to have a change in.
Dude, super helpful. Let's give these guys a round of applause. We'd love to open the floor up to some questions, if anybody has it, for these young 29-year-old, good-looking, successful men.
I love building your guys' businesses and just your general vibe on the AI, defensible businesses, super empathetic. I just really resonate with it, and so I think that's awesome. My background's more in venture-backed startups, curious to get more into Main Street from an operational perspective. And I guess what I'm curious is, if you two weren't doing your current businesses, what kind of markets or what kind of industries you'd be looking at pretty closely?
Good question. I've personally never looked for an industry myself. It's always been something was weird and an interesting situation that I got really excited about. But to me, I think there are quick win businesses I think about frequently, and where I think AI can play really interesting elements to it. But going back to the love for unsexy businesses, there is a remarkable amount of of large markets, maybe not raising $100 million of venture scale, but you don't need to, and I would make the argument it's better not to. But there's a lot of sleepy, amazing industries in MSPs and ISVs, in insurance, in a lot of the kind of broker-based businesses that are, nobody's focused on them because an investor will say the TAM's not big enough. And that's when you give them a nice middle finger and say, I'm gonna do it anyway. But that's where I would look more of. Every time an investor says the TAM's not big enough, that's the one you wanna go, because the TAM wouldn't be big enough for $10 billion companies, certainly big enough for one real good one. So I can't give you an exact industry, but that's kind of my thesis.
On my end, I almost started a different company out of college. I was much more into space, and I'd just come off an internship at SpaceX and was very bought into all that. It was always clear to me what I wanted to do was at the intersection of construction and technology in some form. But within that kind of larger sandbox, there was other angles I thought about taking. As I mentioned, once I analyze things, for me it feels like maintaining the existing supply is more important today. But I do really love the companies that are also building robotics. Icon in Austin is an awesome company, and so I think robotics are just really cool. There's so many new advancements these days, and so many new things are possible, and I'm just excited to see where that leads. And who knows, maybe there's a world in 5-10 years where there's all these humanoid robots and Drillbit somehow manages them. So there might be a world where these coincide, but if it wasn't kind of the pure software play, it would be something physical but still related to to construction and home services somehow.
Thank you.
And anecdotally, most of what we see, especially when we're looking at companies, we see TAMs that are probably like a little conservative because people don't realize what this means in aggregate across all of these areas that are largely like unreported or underreported. Speaking to the data side of the house, right? 45% of GDP comes from small business. Gallup polling, who's the largest data provider, oldest in the U.S., they're still completely blind to the effect of it. They're really trying to understand it more. So, take that and figure back on.
Cool.
Yes.
Maybe
Yeah,
sure,
yeah,
maybe
no.
on the back. You guys, I am also Alex, and I'm also an unsexy business of logistics.
Come
so I
on
think that's amazing. I didn't know. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know that we had a club. But I'm in logistics. I'm a startup that's trying to kind of revolutionize the e-commerce logistics last mile space. So I'm looking to integrate AI into a lot of things that we do. A lot to start out in the back end, the way that we actually provide the service, the way that we're actually running the business. So I'm curious, as you guys were integrating and implementing AI, how are you looking at from like proprietary data, IP, right? If it's going to be a core part of like what we do, not just the interface with like a consumer or client. Is there any like precedent that is being set for IP?
Yeah, I have a good amount of thoughts on this. First off, I think like the models and all these like the foundational models are quickly becoming commoditized and are like easy to use, and there's no IP there. I mean, you can build your own models if you have a very niche application, but by and large, it's not worth it for the vast majority of businesses. And I think like when kind of LLMs first started to get interesting, a lot of people like dismissed tons of companies as being like, oh, you're a ChatGPT wrapper. But there's like, I can tell you firsthand, like there's a lot of work involved in how you orchestrate and manage all the context and state required to actually get anything useful out of the LM. So your data, the state, that's kind of where a lot of your IP is. And then the second thing is a lot of people like, I think kind of fall short where they see an LLM, they see the ChatGPT interface, and they could just conceptualize AI as being a text-based thing. And there's the voice too, but for the most part, they think of it as like communications. But there's so much opportunity when you're building on the back end to like the way we describe it to our like non-technical customers is, yeah, our AI has a voice, but it also has hands. So like getting it to actually do something useful and having like the structured output to do all the tool calls and function calls for it to like interact with your system at a deeper level. That's where you can really like get a lot of additional engineering velocity internally, because like we can like mock out huge sections of the code base really, really quickly by having like non-user facing LLMs that are actually doing, more back-end work. And then one last thing I'll say just on like a quick little tidbit is like, if you are just starting to dabble with integrating it, there's some like really easy wins. Like I'd recommend every company has every one of their engineers use Cursor if you're not already. And there's like other little easy wins. Like we just started using this tool called Greptile, which does automated like AI PR reviews on your code changes. So there's like a lot of solutions popping up like that, where if you start chaining them together, there's like compounding wins that lead to more and more eng velocity, which increases, makes your product better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm less equipped to answer it because our AI product, it's our highest attachment rate product, and it's really great. But I'd say the way that we think about the implementation of AI is it's a value add to the actual core integration product. So there are other companies building AI for SMB will become somewhat ubiquitous and not so hard to do. And so our unique value is in a similar way, the unique data that we have, all your customers, all your revenues, all your machine statuses, all the operating side of your business that then feeds into the value of AI and actually how much time it can save you and the impact it can make. So I think it depends on the use case. In our case, AI, like the hand element of AI is not as important as of today, because what it's inbounding is a physical experience in a location, and that's what it's handling, but it's not taking out the physical experience of the location. And so for us, the way we built it and the tool set was much more of kind of shock and awe to the operator and direct value in time saving. And so we built a lot of our own kind of proprietary work on top of OpenAI, and I'd encourage you from a voice perspective. There's a couple great libraries for that, and a couple companies that we both have shared and looked at in terms of, at least from the voice side and voice and text. So again, I think it would depend on the use case and what you want it to do and how core do you want AI to be a part of your value proposition versus like an enabler.
Yeah, and I think when we think of it in a way, especially across the businesses on the holdco side of the house, is you want to know how to use AI like to integrate more, use it for integration. It's quite literally what systems aren't talking to each other that you want to, and that's where you start with AI.
Can I follow up?
Please.
Cool. Do you have a tool in your stack that is used for detecting drift in your outputs? It's like one of the hardest things with prompt engineering is that like you don't have regression testing.
Yeah.
Do you have something built for that?
So it's really interesting to be building with AI today because like as like basically all the companies that are using AI are all now growing, and so like the urgency is mounting where like they have like lots of actual important customers that are paying them a lot, and so like evals and like everything around testing and evals is also starting to catch up, which is exciting. So like literally last week we started experimenting with this tool called Rourke. They were under the same, they're in the current YC batch, about to do their round, so shout out to them if you guys are investors. But anyways, like there's like a lot of tools like this popping up where you can pipe in all your production data to a dashboard, and then you can do different LLM based like custom evals where it's natural language based, so you can like set up any criteria to basically catch any edge case that might be an issue.
Yeah.
And then you can monitor that in real time and basically pick out the calls from production that are failing there.
Are those evals like open source evals that are like the math ones and the like needle and haystack and all that stuff? Or
Yeah.
is that like business logic evals that are custom?
Yeah,
Internal?
more high level, more like business. Like I mean, they're like literally things like, can you check if the AI interrupted this person? Can you check if they scheduled at a different day from the day that they confirmed with the voice? Like I say, all these tools are catching up, but like they're still pretty nascent. So like they're not that mature, but like it is nice to have some visibility into what it's doing rather than just blindly sort of dumping out a prompt. I've seen other really cool companies pop up where they're doing adversarial kind of evals and test frameworks where they're spinning up an LLM that's posing as your client, and it's like but posing as a bad client and trying to break your system, and it'll score it that way. So it's actually fun because like traditionally with software engineering, I think like tests and evals have been something that like everyone's like, yeah, I should do it, but I don't know. And then now it's actually becoming like an interesting problem, and it's only going to become more interesting as like we do more of these adversarial patterns.
That's
Yeah.
a quick follow-up to that.
Yeah.
Regarding your stack,
Yeah.
did you is it a homegrown agent system that you built, or did you use like one of the existing frameworks?
Yeah. So there's like LangChain and those kind of things out there. They're not. We don't use them in production. Everything's like custom because LangChain's really good right now for like spinning up a proof of concept, but not quite there yet for production ready use cases. But we would love to like clean up more of this because it is all homegrown. And when you're a small company with limited resources, like there's a lot of room for improvement. But because like going off the other question, that's so core to our IP that it's really important we get that right. So yeah, homegrown.
Thank you guys again. Awesome. Great to